Right, hello everyone. Welcome to the Managing Digital Projects podcast. We are going to talk about project management. We've got a topic for today which is delivery planning. Even though we manage digital projects, some of what we talk about might be useful to any type of project you might be managing. Just stick around and we'll see what you learn today or what we can get into. I'm Tom. I'm the head of project delivery at Digital 22, and with me is Faisal.
Thank you, Tom. So I'm Faisal, responsible for project delivery. The key things I'm responsible for is making sure the projects are on time, that they're on track, they're on budget, and they're on point. So I'm going to kick us off by talking about delivery planning. When do I get involved? When do we get involved in as a team? And it all starts off with, it'd be fair to say, as soon as that project has been signed off by the client.
Yep.
And the key objectives, the business case, the business goal, the reason why that project is there is all signed off. And that could be for any project. It could be a website project, an inbound project. Ultimately, we want to know what the goals are for the client, what the key objectives are. And once that's all mapped out, we sort of want to review what the timelines are. When does the client want to start the project? When do they want to start reviewing those key deliverables within that project? And when do they want us to ultimately deliver that project? I think once all of this is sort of mapped out and scoped out, and we understand key things such as like dependencies and milestones, at what point do we start delivering standalone deliverables? When, for example, we've got a web project and you've got a branding project and you've got the website project. We know the branding has to be sort of finalized before the website project goes live. But what are the start and end dates of those mini deliverable projects? I think that's where you guys sort of come in, isn't it? You sort of map things out and plan. How do you sort of work around that? How do you know how long a piece of work is going to take, a deliverable is going to take?
Yeah, so like you say, we know what we're trying to achieve with this project. We know what we want to do. We know when it needs to happen. We know what our key dependencies are. We know what possibly is a risk. So we're good to go. We've got this project. We've got a bunch of other projects. So then how are we going to plan that work out, not just for this project, but across all our projects? And some people listening might be dealing with one project, but a lot of people probably can relate to this, that they've got multiple projects going on at the same time. So how are you going to deliver all those projects? So you get things to people when they need, and how are you going to react when you need to tweak something? So we do a lot of time estimates. And I think everyone's got their own way of doing this. People might be doing it very theoretical, percentages of people's workload, like this piece of work might take half of an employee's time. That's very high level approaches. Here in a service industry business, we are getting down to as much detail as we can. So we're collecting a lot of data, a lot of time estimates. We speak to the people up front. They're the ones who tell us how long things are going to take. But then we've also got tools to track how long things are taking. You could do this by keeping a spreadsheet maybe of timings as you go. But we've got a project management system that collects our information for us. So the powerful thing then we have, and we're fortunate enough, we do a lot of repeatable work. No one piece is exactly the same, but you can get a lot of good time estimates based off of similar sorts of work, so that you can get your forecasting as accurate as possible. So we do that, and we regularly review those timings with people. You can't be doing it every day, every week, but monthly, quarterly, annually for some items, depending on the frequency of that piece of work. Just go back and look, see how long it took you, and update your averages. Get the best possible foundations for your planning to be executed.
So you mentioned repeatable work. A lot of it is repeatable work. So I imagine that as, again, let's talk about web projects. So you got a designer designing a certain number of pages for a client, and that person will be doing exactly the same thing the next day and the day after and the day after, but for different clients. How does that sort of work? Because what one client wants to see on a design might be very different. Is the timing still roughly the same? Would he spend the same amount of time, or does it sort of vary?
No, and you're dealing with estimates here, aren't you? So you can never say you will take this exact amount of time. That would give a bad client experience. You're looking for the best possible structure for your people to deliver in. So you be realistic about your timings. You tell people the quality you expect to deliver, and you try and set them up for success. So you set them up with some buffer, but not too not too much buffer that you're not delivering what you need to on time. Especially in our business, we need to deliver results for clients. The quicker we can do these things for clients, the quicker they can start achieving marketing results. So that finding that balance of a bit of space to be able to do the things you need, but then also to get that work done. And we know if I forecast 8 hours for something, someone might take 7 for one client, they might take 9 for another. All you're hoping is that it balances out as best as it can for people.
On an average, as long as it balances it out, it sort of works.
You can't promise someone that every day is going to be the same. You just would be lying to them if you said, I can keep you at exactly the same level every day. But you can set them up as best you can and then try and get them to manage it as best they can too.
Excellent.
Question for me then, Faisal. You're in the project delivery manager role. You're working with our teams day to day, dealing with a lot of timelines. How are you working that with the teams?
So I think I rely on you guys for a large portion of everything that I do, and that's based on the stuff that you've just touched on in terms of timings. When I'm working with these teams, I want to know that those timings are realistic, they've been mapped out, they've been recorded, and we have like sort of a good average, and we do review them regularly, because what I don't want is to have projects have a delivery date for a particular project or a deliverable and then not be able to meet that because the timings are more or less. Because what I do find is sometimes there might be there's an overlap. We're an agency, we're a fast-paced agency. We work on a number of projects constantly, and so there's going to be an overlap between something that you might work on Monday and you've got to drag it over into a Tuesday, but you've got something else lined up for a Tuesday. So that's a massive challenge. So one of the ways I try and run teams is to run sort of production calls. We do them in the mornings. We do them on alternate days for some teams. We'll do them every day for some teams. If it's needed for particular departments, we'll do them every day. And what we'll do is we'll sort of just map the progress of those key deliverables, those projects, up at project level and down to task level, just to make sure we, as a business and people, as individuals, are doing what they need to do on a daily basis. Yeah. So that's sort of how I sort of manage the delivery of making sure on a weekly basis we do what we need to do. Again on a daily basis, doing what we need to do.
And that's where we get some of our key insights, isn't it? Through those conversations that you have with the teams every day, through the learnings of what works well, what doesn't work well. And I think we've been able to take a lot of that back into our planning, haven't we? So then, I don't know if you want to touch on the different approaches we've got for the teams. So we've got certain roles where a certain structure is going to work one way well, and then a structure for other types of teams.
Yeah, so because we have multiple departments as an agency, we sort of have so many different departments working on so many different things. Let's look at the content team, for example. So you've got the content team and they work on producing blogs. We know exactly how long a blog takes. We have a good understanding of that based on historics. And that output is very clear. It's a key. It's very core. You can get you can get somebody to write a blog, and that's done within the morning. But you've got somebody else in a completely different team, like SEO, for example, where the optimization work they might be doing on page, off page, can take a week, can take a month. So it's very different. So how we sort of manage these teams. What works for this team might be a simple tracking sheet to track what's happening in the morning, in the afternoon, and we do that via the project management system that we use. Whereas what might work with the SEO team is just making sure on a daily basis and tracking that progress against the hours that we'd allocated for that SEO task, for example.
Yeah. So if you take one team might want, if they're very production heavy, they might want a whole week, month, quarter planned out, every piece of work, so they're clear on what they've got to achieve and get through. Whereas if I look at our development team, there's more times where we keep them in a more agile state, where we plan a few days in advance, we know what work they've got, but then it can be very day to day. Okay, today the project's evolved into this and you are going to be working on that.
Yeah.
It requires a lot more frequent comms from you. So we definitely have varying approaches across
100%, like you say, it works very different. I think the great example is the dev team, where we do need an agile approach, compared to say again the content team, where we can plan out the next quarter. We can plan out the whole quarter, and we can say, okay, we've got X amount of blogs to write across the next 3 months, and divided between X amount of people, X amount of weeks. This is what you're delivering, and it's sort of mapped out. It really helps people organize the way they work. Versus the dev team, just the nature of dev work, things change, things break, things need updating, things need reviewing. They need to learn. A lot of the times when we're developing these websites or we're designing these pages, it needs additional creativity, or it might need some additional software or a new tool that we've not used before based on the client's request. So we've got to try and remain agile and give people the space and time to think. So we can't, as much as we want to set out their week and deliver that project within that time frame, we still need to be conscious of spanner in the works, for example. Something might come in that we've not planned for. So do we give them that? Do we remain agile and say, okay, work on this today and then work on it again on Wednesday and take a break from this and work on that? So that happens all the time, and it's a challenge. Of course, it's a challenge because we've got delivery expectations to meet across the business. The other thing that I think impacts how agile teams have to be is depending on client expectations. A part of my role is working with clients, speaking to clients, working with teams and work with their clients. And client expectations change depending on the pressures they have in their industry and in their business. And they might want you to start something and pause something, and they might cause delays. All of this makes sort of forces us to be agile across the business.
Yeah. So as much predictability as you can for the people who need it the most with those heavy production targets, and then the agility where possible.
100%. 100%. I think this is where you guys come in a lot, isn't it? When in terms of like setting up those projects and distributing that work across the business. How do you sort of manage that? How do you find distributing work across the teams?
I think it's a great, if you're into puzzles.
It's fixing puzzles.
Every day it's like a moving puzzle. Anyone who's managing multiple projects will know this. So you can have the best plans in the world, and you can sit there and go, right, I have sorted everyone for the next 3 weeks. I know exactly what they're doing, and that's what's going to happen. And that is not what is going to exactly happen.
Holidays and sicknesses, all that stuff, does it throw you off?
Factors. So you're always tweaking to get the best performance. If you could set and leave, you could set that plan and leave it for 3 weeks, but you wouldn't get the best out of that plan. There would be downtime. There would be people when they are maxed out with no support. So your best bet is to smooth that out as best as possible to make the delivery as effective as it can be, so you can have the best quality work going to your clients.
100%.
So I guess I think we touched on it a little bit, Faisal, and John's given us our amazing videographer, who's doing all the magic behind the scenes. He's given us the okay. He said we can just carry on talking for ages if we want. I think that's what you just said, wasn't it, John?
Absolutely. I think you can edit as much as you can.
We might get onto a few more topics, but I think we've got time for a couple more. So my question for you is, can you completely fill someone up every day?
Yes and no. I think it depends on the individual, and it depends on the type of work they're doing, and it depends on where they are in terms of headspace. Some people like to work in slots or sprints, and they just want to come in and just want to power through things. And that's fine. That's the way you want to work. That's cool. We're agile. Everything we do is very agile, and we can allow you to do that. And that might work in certain departments. Let's take the SEO team, for example. We might plan something in for something to be completed across the month. But if that person can deliver that within a week, within a day, then that's fine. If they can do that, if they can power through something, they can do that. But at the same time, I do also recognize you can't load somebody up for 8 hours a day. There's lots of variables. People need to have lunch. People need to have toilet breaks. People need to have headspace to just sit back, think, sort of like look at the work that they've done, and we need to provide that headspace. So as much as your teams will your team will focus on filling that schedule up and filling that capacity up for that individual. For me, I when I'm working with these guys on a day-to-day level, I do get the sense that people just want to have the flexibility to bring stuff forward from the future, work on something that's here and now, But again, all of that ties in with the overall project. It's all well and good giving people the flexibility to bring stuff forward and deprioritize something else. But if they're not involved at that, project delivery level, working at that project at a high level, they might deprioritize something versus something that is a priority. Yeah. So it's a tough balance. It's always a tough balance, and that's what those production calls really help me keep things in focus.
Yeah, and you do a lot of that work with people, don't you, to look at blockers they might have and look at opportunities to do work that maybe was planned in the future to try and keep their schedules as nice and even as they can. So would that be one of your tips for people, whether it's someone who's got the support of someone like you or managing their workload on their own, dependencies, like being aware of them?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's something that I try and flag up with, because you can go into a zone if you've got a task to do and you can just sort of focus on that particular task and then just complete that task off and then just walk away from it and not know who's the next person to sort of pass that baton on to. And likewise for the other person, it's always good to, I think it's a great idea. It's a great tool to be able to just look at the system, look at where you sort of fit into that puzzle and see, can you pull something forward? Can you sort of help yourself in the future by doing something now rather than waiting for it, if it's possible?
Yeah. It's rare that you're doing a piece of work that doesn't have some sort of dependency. Like, so you're not waiting on someone for something or someone's not waiting on something from you. So understanding how you play your part in that chain of things that need to happen and understanding all the different types of work you've got on and where each of those pieces of work are, I think gives you options, doesn't it, to manage your workload as effectively as you can. If you know that something might have been accelerated and might be happening earlier than originally planned, that gives you options if something gets delayed to keep yourself as flexible as you can be.
Yeah, I think John's a great example. I mean, John's dependency is the availability of myself and yourself for him to record this podcast.
Yeah.
But he can sort of work with us to sort of free himself up next week for something else that he wants to work on.
I think he did that.
And I think he did that. And he'll drag us in and get us to record a podcast.
It's like he planned it.
Work around us to do that.
Fabulous. So I think a question for me is, what do you do to manage people when they haven't, say, someone's just not got any work, got no dependencies, no work that they can pull forward where the dependency's been fulfilled? What do you do in that scenario?
I think this is the great thing about Digital 22 is we give people that opportunity where it's okay to have nothing on your plate that you can physically work on. Because
no, it's not okay, people. The team will watch. It's not okay.
It's okay to take this time back and
I'm kidding, of course.
It's okay to take this time back and sort of learn something, grow and learn.
100%.
Because of the nature of the industry we're in, we have to be on top of our game, and that applies to every department, to every person that works here. I mean, great. Right now we're having inbound, and it's a great example where the whole business is taking out 2 hours a day per each person or more, if needed, to watch, to learn, to update yourself, to sort of refresh and sort of reinvigorate your skills. And I think that's those moments when they do happen gives that person that flexibility to go in and just sort of step back and just train and just learn something, do some certifications, do some HubSpot training and do that.
Exactly. If we never learn and we're standing still, the competition are just going ahead of us and we're going backwards effectively. So finding that time is key, isn't it? So it is
100%.
Okay to take some time out from delivery. Don't record this bit. Maybe edit this bit out, John. Delivery. But it is okay.
You heard it from Tom.
It is okay sometimes to take a step back.
It's okay to push back and say, I need some time.
And learn. And the way I look at it is, if you take a task, you're doing a task every day. It takes an hour every day, always. What if you took some time out to look at your process and to reflect on your learnings? So it's not just the learning time. The learning time is amazing. You take that as well. But then the time to look at your processes.
I think this
can
is
I
really
do this
key.
thing in a better way, a more effective way? Maybe even get better quality out of the way that I do it. And it might result in a lower time to achieve that task. And that task that took me an hour every day might turn into a 50-minute task. And I've got 10 minutes back off that task every time I do it every day. And if it's my repeatable task, that's a massive win for me and for the business.
I think it's really crucial what you touched on in terms of just like improving processes regularly. And if you're not improving processes regularly, you don't know if you can create efficiencies.
Yeah.
You don't know if you can question it again and again and again to say, why do we do that? Why do we do that? Why do we do that? We use the 5 whys example, don't we? We try and implement lean Sigma as much as we can. And I think it's so crucial to step back, look at a process, look at why you do a thing in a particular way, and then question and question and question and question it again, because ultimately it will save you time in the long run. But all of this requires lots of comms, lots of communications, and lots of discussing between people and grabbing people and talking to people. How do you sort of do that? How do you think is the best way to sort of do that?
Well, a question for me, bonus question, which we didn't plan for, but is, can anyone improve a process?
That's a great question. I think so. I think we are flexible enough to let everyone know whether you are working on SEO or content or dev or web strategy, or if you can find something that you think you want to improve, raise it, flag it. There's lots of areas to do that. You can do it on production calls. You can do it on your individual stand-ups. You can do it within your team. We're not restricted like in large organizations. There's lots of paperwork and there's lots of people with great ideas that struggle to implement these ideas just because of the nature of those businesses. But here at D22, it's very different. We're very flexible. Somebody's got a great idea, put your hand up and we'll help you work it through.
Exactly. And if you've got the support of people who can just check those ideas for you, check it's not going to increase the time it takes to deliver something for a client or make it a non-viable piece of work because you've turned a piece of work from 10 minutes into 3 hours because you really want to do something amazing for it, but then the client doesn't want to pay for that. So as long as you consider all of those things, and businesses can give their staff great frameworks for that, little cheat sheets with a few things to think through on processes, and just empower people to improve those processes and have a go. And look, I think the main thing is do it, but then just go back and check it. Did it actually improve? If it didn't, maybe your old way was better, or maybe you need to try a new way.
I think one of the things that we forgot to mention earlier on, and I wanted to touch on, was the culture aspect of how we approach things here. I mean, we see a lot of people spending a lot of time. We spend so much time playing football, playing FIFA. We have these.
I don't.
Well, yeah, I'd like to beg to think otherwise. We allow people that time to sort of step back, go and play a computer game, go and have a drink, go and have a walk, and do something outside of your normal day-to-day role. That will help you sort of just refresh and just come back.
And that's trust in people, isn't it? But to enable people to make the best use of that trust, you've got to give them the good tools. So I think the main thing I wanted, before we finish up, the thing I really wanted to reflect on, because we've talked about a lot of good tactics for planning delivery and even managing a bit of the execution. But if you do all this great stuff we talked about, if you don't communicate any of it, none of it works.
100%.
And if you don't to communicate how you've structured people's weeks, the dependencies they might have, the things to watch out for, the sort of decisions you're making, why you're giving them a certain amount of work one day versus another, why it might be busy or not so busy. If you don't keep communicating that, people won't know the decisions you've made and then won't execute your plan as well as they could do. So you try not to micromanage people, but you want to give them a platform to succeed. And that's why giving people time to go play FIFA or to play football five-a-side or do Dungeons and Dragons and all the other great things that we do as a business. If you don't give them the platform to manage their schedule really well, they can't take advantage of those great things. Otherwise, they'll just get bogged down with work because they'll get behind and they won't know where they're up to. So you have to have a good, solid platform and communicate it well to get all the best things out of that working environment.
Yeah, ultimately, in order to tie this sort of thing together and deliver to expectations at project level, at deliverable level, at task level, milestone level, we trust people to just sort of get on with it, to get their shit done, to do what they need to do. And if it means they need to talk to other people to support them to do what they need to do, then we trust that individual. We trust these people to communicate. Talk to your colleagues, talk to people who are above you in the dependency, below you in the dependency, talk to the project manager, talk to the project delivery manager, talk to the web strat, the marketing strat. Keep talking, which sort of enables you to fulfill your task.
Yeah.
The only way you can do your task is if you talk to people. If you sit there and don't talk to anybody and just look at your task board, you can't get that. You can't complete that task. You need to talk to people to sort of understand it. I think one of the things that we get a lot as a blocker is there's no brief in the task. We hear this quite often, and one of the things for me is somebody can write exactly what needs to happen in that task step by step, but it's always good to just have a quick chat, 2-minute chat, 5-minute chat, and just understand where that why and what and how that sort of helps you. Again, what is this? It's communication.
Yeah, and that might be the topic for the next podcast. Who knows? Got a couple of ideas. I think that's everything we wanted to talk through today. Hopefully people who've been watching have got some value out of that, maybe thought about some things they want to try when they're managing projects and delivery planning. But if you want to hit myself and Faisal up on LinkedIn, feel free to ask us any questions, and happy to talk.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Thanks, John.
Thanks for watching, Tom. Everyone. Cheers, Faisal.
Thanks.